What is going on, everyone? Welcome on into Open Ice Hits. A lot going on around the NHL right now, and Connor McDavid sure is lighting the lamp. So is Auston Matthews, and that's exactly where we are going to begin today. These two are unbelievable, and it's crazy because they're tied right now at the top of the league at 21 goals apiece. But they do it in so many different ways, I feel. And I'm not shocked to see that both of them are tied, but they have their own appeal to it, and it's sexy in both ways. I'm like drawn to it. It's so sexy to see them skate around and make it happen. But it's different. It's different. And I ask you, Durso, who do you think at the end of the year is going to be able to lead the league in goals when it's all said and done?
Wow. Who's going to lead the league?
Yeah.
I mean, that's such a loaded question because
it really is.
They're not the same type of goal scorer. That's the weird part. Like, Auston Matthews is that shooter type guy, so you expect him to get those goals. And he was, pretty much up until he was out of the lineup for a little bit, he was scoring at such a clip that it was just ridiculous. I mean, we had people literally talking about, and I started to think it too. I think I told you this. It's like, is he going to actually somehow in 56 games make it to 50 with the rate he's scoring?
He was scoring
2 or 3 a night.
Yeah.
And he's kind of cooled off since then. I haven't heard his name near as much. I mean, we're going to be able to get into this later on when Johnny Gaudreau is on with us because they just played Toronto. They won a game 2-0 that didn't involve any goal scoring from their big guns. I mean, what was it? Jason Spezza and Zach Hyman. And that's like, okay, that's not the lead guys. That wasn't Mitch Marner scoring, wasn't John Tavares scoring, wasn't Auston Matthews scoring. So, sometimes they're obviously that's how good of a team they are. We talked about that as well. Like they're such a deep team that they don't have to have it be that way. But it does feel like Matthews has cooled off a little bit, and here comes McDavid. McDavid's just, I've said it before, I think on here. He's a video game cheat code. What he does is just ridiculous, and I don't know what's going. The only thing that I question about him being the goal scoring leader at the end is he does it all so well. He's able to score, but he's also able to set up everybody else just as well. And they're obviously so much of it comes from their power play. Their power play is just ridiculous, and that's the question. The only question that's left is he going to be able to continue to score at that rate? Because that's so much of Auston Matthews' game that McDavid does both well. He sets guys up well, and that's not to say Matthews can't, but he doesn't do it at the same rate. I mean, the point totals that they have are vastly different.
Yeah, so McDavid's on a 9-game point streak, by the way, with 7 goals and 13 assists for 20 points in this 9-game stretch, and he just hit 60 points. I think you were telling me when we were shooting the shit a little bit before we started the show that he's got more points than the Sabres do goals.
That's right.
Oh, come on.
That is 60-59 right now.
Now, when we look at that, do we praise Connor McDavid or do we have to look at the Sabres and go, yo, fellas, come on, which one is it?
Well, we've already kind of done that with the Sabres, so to speak. I really actually just think this is a testament to what kind of talent Connor McDavid is. If you're putting up 60 points in 34 games and you're doing this with somebody, I mean, I got to go back and look just to see what his numbers are every year because, he 48 points in 45 games in his rookie year that was cut short by an injury. 100 points in 82 the next year, 108 in 82 the year after that, 116 in 78, 97 in 64, now 60 and 34. He's scoring at an outrageous rate. I mean, the game is, we've talked about this before, the game's changed an awful lot, but this is like the modern, and it's weird that I'm going to say it this way because of who he plays for. That's modern day Gretzky type level. And I'm saying that like, this is how far and away he might be the best player in the league now, that he produces at a rate that makes you sit there and at least sit there and think no one's done it like this in this era to the level that you can sit there and say, well, he's that much better than everybody else. The way that Gretzky was, Gretzky was scoring at such an outrageous rate that's what, like, what's the thing about Gretzky? If you took away every goal he ever scored, he's still the all-time points leader because that's how much he produced for that team.
Now, in those seasons you spit, how many goals were scored in each season? Because I want to try and see with Matthews. And you got to remember, Matthews had that wrist injury. And is that going to play a role? Discomfort? Is it going to linger? He did miss a couple games with the wrist. So I just wonder, with the goal scoring, which he can still do with or without this injured wrist, of course, is that something that will limit him? But what are the goal totals with all those points that McDavid had?
So the rookie year it was 16, so 16 out of 48, then 30 out of 100. I mean, the second year he was about as rounded as you could get with that because he had 30 goals, 70 assists, 100 points. I mean, he doesn't get much more perfect than that, probably, right? 41 in that season in 2017, 2018, then 41 again out of the 116 the year after, and then last season he had 34 out of 97. So this season he's at 21 out of 60.
Okay, so I'm just thinking if we're asking the question and debating between the two, I think that those numbers obviously Matthews. It's just because right now, like as you kind of alluded to, there was a stretch where Auston Matthews was 17 goals in 17 games, and could he score 50? And then it died off a bit. And right now, it's, hey, McDavid's turn. He's got the 7 goals in 9 games. And then there's going to be a stretch where maybe McDavid doesn't score as much, and he's dishing the puck around to Draisaitl or Nugent Hopkins, and maybe he's not the one scoring at the crazy level, which would then allow Matthews to jump back into a hot stretch or something. But I just think because of the nature of Matthews' game, I think he's gonna, like, my gut feeling says it's going to lean in his direction. Because he's the sniper. He's the one that's gonna come down the left side of the wall and he's gonna rip it short side, or he's gonna come down the right side of the wall and he's gonna shoot it far side. He has that pure natural sniping ability where McDavid might pass up on some of those looks to dish it back door or to pass it somewhere else. And I have the gut feeling that the goal scorer will come out on top at all this. But are you concerned of the wrist?
Well, yeah, sure, absolutely. And I think where your argument's coming from for that is that McDavid has, in the last 3 seasons, 41, 41, and 34. And that's still outstanding, don't get me wrong. But then you go to Matthews and you realize that 34 is the lowest he's had in his entire career in a season. He's, 40 exactly once, 47 last year, 37 the year before that, and 34 in a year where he only played in 62 games. So imagine what it could have been. Like, even the years that he's been under 40 in his first 4 seasons of his career have both been shortened in some way. He's played less than 70 games in both. So you can probably make the assumption that a full 82 would get him there. Maybe that's the knock on Auston Matthews, honestly, is aside from his rookie year, he did play in every game for Toronto last season. That was 70 was the marker for a lot of teams. So that's not fair to sit there and say that. But he's been hurt a couple different times, whether you look at this season with the wrist or you look at the 2 seasons I mentioned earlier where it's under 70 and full 82 game seasons. So
another thing,
and it doesn't, and his points total obviously doesn't balance out near as much like toward the hundreds that McDavid's does. His career high in points is 80. So
yeah, but in terms of scoring, that's a little bit different. But I just think too, when you're playing with someone like Mitch Marner, it's almost like you have that guy that's going to be able to feed you where you need to be. It's like what Ovechkin has with some of the players around him, right? Like, you're going to find some of the beautiful passes that you get from Backstrom and all these players. They can really dish you that biscuit and put it in your breadbasket for you, right where you need to go for the one-timers and all that. You have that player, Mitch Marner, specifically this year. Mitch Marner's on a tear. That can really benefit Auston Matthews when it comes to scoring and lighting the lamp.
Yeah, it can. Matthews over his career is kind of, Marner's been kind of one of the few constants for him on his line, but he's played with a bunch of different people. So it's hard to look at like how he would help set up somebody else like that. Like, you don't picture him setting up Zach Hyman all the time when he was playing with Zach Hyman. Like, Zach Hyman's not going to score 30 goals in a year either just because he plays with Matthews and Marner, right? Like, he's a nice player and he fills the role really well, but that's not what they're out there for all the time. I mean, they've got the guy who goes out and then scores 40 goals a year. And like, let's put it this way, for our reference sake, because this is how we both grew up. When the Flyers were out there with the Legion of Doom, John LeClair was the guy who scored the goals, and Lindros could, but Renberg wasn't out there exactly trying to score 30 a year. But he set up goals and he helped be a part of that team and took some of the attention off of the other two at times, right? That's what I think the third guy on that line with Matthews and Marner does. Kind of takes the attention off. If you're going to focus so much attention on those two, he'll be open at some point, right? So that's what I think is more about that. But I don't think that there's anything, like, I wouldn't worry too much about whether or not, whoever the third guy is on the line or whatever like that. I think more or less it's just a matter of, once that wrist gets back into full health, look out if he gets back on a tear like that. I mean, right now he's kind of, like I said, he's kind of going through a little bit of, for his standards, he's going through a slow patch right now because he's had, I don't remember exactly, but I guess it was right at the end of February because there was a gap from February 24th to March 3rd. and he had gone 2 games without a goal then. And then he came back and went 3 games without a goal, scored 2, scored 1, and now is 4 games without a goal again. So he's at 3 goals in the last, what would that be, about 10 to 12 games, which when you now think about that though too, then if I just took 10 to 12 games off of his total, and that takes us back to, for him, I guess it would be about 17, 18 games played in the season. You're telling me he had 18 goals in 18 games. He was at a point per game. That's why everybody thought 50 was possible. He was at a goal per game pace, not just a point per game pace, a goal per game pace. And now that's really cooled off. And I think I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the injury, because it wasn't like it was a lower body.
A goal per game is ridiculous. It's almost like you knew it would even itself out at some point as well, where you can't keep up this pace. I know we would love for it to happen, but you just can't keep up that pace forever. And how about this? Are we disrespecting some of the other guys that are behind McDavid and Auston Matthews? Draisaitl has 18 goals. Toffoli has 18 goals. Rantanen has 17, and then it kind of goes into your Kyle Connor, 16. Brock Besser has 16. So realistically, I don't think that they have a shot at it, but Draisaitl, we talked about how important Mitch Marner is to Matthews scoring, and I brought up Backstrom with Ovi. Well, if McDavid is going to be passing the puck around, which we say is one of his strongest attributes, is Draisaitl in the running to maybe make that push and take over Connor McDavid as the Edmonton Oiler? At the end of the day, could Draisaitl finish with more goals than McDavid is the question I guess I'm asking.
Well, yeah, for sure he could. And part of that helps having Connor McDavid next to you, right? Or part of your power play and part of your line. I mean, I believe that the story, and I didn't get to watch a whole lot of the Edmonton game from last night, but I believe the story was, as I kept an eye on some of the scores anyway, is that they were trailing as the game got later, and that's when they went back to we're loading up. So Draisaitl's with McDavid again, 5-on-5. And I think they put Puljujarvi up there as well, which was like kind of a loaded line, because Puljujarvi's had a good year in his own right too. And that's kind of been a long time coming for where he was drafted and how his story went and all that. But beside the point, I mean, Draisaitl's done that before. He's been the top goal scorer in the league before. It's not like it's unheard of. It's more or less who's doing the producing and who's the one who's finishing on the opportunities more often than the other. I mean, these are 2 guys right now that are blowing everybody else away when it comes to point totals. I mean, McDavid's at 60, Draisaitl's at 50, and then you got to go all the way back to 42 to find Patrick Kane. I mean, it's really saying something when not only is one guy running away with that points race overall, because being at 60 and being 10 up on your teammate as number 2 is really running away with it. But even Draisaitl's at a point where it's like 50 compared to 42. It would take a pretty significant run for Patrick Kane to even just get back to his level, And it sounds weird, like even adding Auston Matthews to that conversation, it sounds really weird to look at Auston Matthews at 36 points and saying he's ranked 6th in the league and going, but he's not even close to where Connor McDavid is, because that's how far and away Connor McDavid has played above everybody else compared to these guys who we traditionally see. I'd keep an eye out for another guy I'd keep an eye out for when it comes to the scoring for right now. Ovechkin's at 14, and it's not that he's lower than everybody else or whatever. I know he's still 7 goals off of McDavid and Matthews total, but he's scoring at a really good rate right now. Like, he's finally hitting that hot streak. Missed that time earlier in the year with the 4 games he had to sit out on the COVID list and all that stuff. He's getting to a point now where it's almost like, I mean, he didn't score in the last game they played on Saturday against the Rangers, and that snapped a 5-game goal streak where he had 6 goals.
Yeah,
so
I think
he
the
went
Caps
from 8
were on a 7-game win streak as a team, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
at that time
but he
too.
went on his own run where for 5 games he went from 8 goals on the season to 14 in 5 games, and he continues to do those things that make him a legendary player. We've talked about this before outside of the show, where it's like, he's obviously one of the greats that we'll remember seeing. But, he was off to a bit of it was kind of a shocking slow start for him when it came to the goals. It was like, where's the goal scoring at for him? Because, and Washington was still winning. That was the weird part. It was like, Washington's still winning, but he's not scoring at the rate that he normally does. Kind of what's going on here. And now it's catching up. And it's like, he just recently moved into 6th all time in the goal scoring list, which is incredible enough to think that there's somebody that high on the list in this day and age anyway. And figure that he's on his way to making more progress on that list coming up. You know,
Yeah, no doubt he is.
He's not that far away from the next step, and then the next step after that. I mean, there's an obvious marker that he's not going to get to this season, maybe not even next season at the way that things are going, just because there's not enough time. It's not that he won't score that number of goals, but that mark is 800, because when he gets to 800, now you're in a real exclusive class, you know. But
I think he'll get to 800. I do. By the end of his
career,
I
do. Yeah.
I did a little bit of the math, right? So the problem is I don't know what he's going to finish with at the end of this season. So I did it with where he's at now, but I almost started with the end of this season being in play. But like his goal totals for the last few years was 48, 51, 49, 33, which was a down year. 50 plus, 50 plus. Now, he's 35 years old. Am I going to expect this guy to be a 50-plus goal scorer for the rest of the way? I don't know. It's hard for me to think that way, but it's also Ovechkin, so who knows? There might be a season where he doesn't. But let's say he gets 40 goals each season in the next 3 years, which I don't think is crazy. That's 120 more goals. He's going to – I really do think he's going to be in that mix of – over 100 or 800 goals. Like, I don't think it's that crazy. And Gordie Howe's at 801. So I think he's going to be – I truly believe that he's going to be behind Gretzky and he'll be number 2. Unless – is KHL in play at all?
I don't think so. I actually think he's got his sights on that 800 number.
I do too.
And then not only at 800, but also, like you said, the only guy who he really would be, you know, who it would be a challenge to catch depending on how his career plays out is Gretzky. I think right now he's still scoring at such a rate, and he's it's weird to say it, to call it only, but he's only 35. He's probably still as a goal scorer because of how he plays, because he's not heavily relied on, and he's focused on this area of his game more in the last 3-4 years than he ever had in his career, but he's not relied on to be a defensive stud. You know, they send him out there, go get us a goal, right? So as long as he
so nice.
Yeah, I know. But as long as that's the focus on him as a player, then who's to say that, you know, I'll even give him finish the year off. He's at 14 now, so double his total. Get him to 30 this year, and then give him 30 in each of the next 3, like you said. Now he's 38 years old.
I gave him 40.
Right. But give him 120 that way even.
Oh,
where
okay.
I got you. Where he finishes the rest of this year with 15, 16 more, and then gets 30 in each of the next 3 seasons, which is low on his average for him. You know what I mean? It's below average for him in his career. And yet you give him the 120 that way, and he's second all time, and you're still looking at, what is that at that point? He'd be at 840, and you're talking 57 away.
Without the pandemic, he's breaking Gretzky's record. I truly believe that.
Quite possibly. I mean, it's tough to say, but because, again, the thing that we can't factor in is you're also one significant injury away from it all being over, you know, at this stage of his career. That's probably the only thing that gets in the way. There's no way to make it a full-on assumption just yet, but there's no reason to think he can't do it if he stays healthy and he plays for, say, 5 more years. You're now catching up to the point where, you know, the number is 895. If he gets to 895, he's the all-time leading goal scorer. And he's now at 720. So you're getting to the point now where you're coming up on less than 150 to get there. And let's just say you got 5 years left. If you're at less than 150 with 5 years left, do the math. You know, you're not talking about something that's high end for him, given how he scored 50 at a regular clip. It's possible. And it's scary to think how it's possible.
I know. I love the fact, too, that the other night he gets rocked and then he scores 2 bingos to shut everybody up. It's like, that's where it's interesting, because I heard the philosophy of when you play someone like Ovechkin, there's some coaches that say, hey, don't wake up the beast. Just allow him to do whatever. Like, don't be physical with him. Don't piss him off. Don't frustrate him. And I don't know. Did I tell the Connor Clifton story on the pod before? I think I did, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So very similar to that is, you know, here's Connor Clifton. All right, we're beating them or whatever. I woke up the beast being an idiot. He goes out and scores a bunch of goals in the third, and then he rips me into shreds. My coach is like, yo, what are you doing? You woke up a dude, like, you know? So how would you approach that? Because there's a side of me that's like, if you can rock Ovechkin and maybe throw him off a little bit, I'm not against that. What am I going to tell my players? Don't go out there and hit a player and be physical like Ovechkin. If you get a chance to hit Ovechkin and knock him on his ass, I kind of want him to do that. But there is another side to it. But my point is, let's not act like that can't also help your team. It might have backfired on that night. It's like dropping the mitts. You could drop the mitts and it could work and it could really, really energize your team. But it could also energize the other team. Who's to say that that couldn't have worked out in your favor? It just didn't on that night.
Well, I found it funny because I forget when we started talking about show topics. I think it might have been Friday, to be honest. And as we started to talk about it, literally after I pitched the thing about, well, we still haven't gotten to Ovechkin yet or whatever, because we had mentioned, we teased that on Thursday's show. And then he went out and scored 2 goals the next game and basically single-handedly won them the game. And it's like, well, that just turned into an even more relevant topic, because it's not just that he scores a lot of goals. He still scores timely goals. He changes their game around. And that's why, that's why he's their leader. It's why we talk about him in this sense. And I think it's just hard to believe because we look at, there's always that talk about records that you think will never be broken. And I do think that there's certain ones for Gretzky that will never be broken. I mean, obviously Ovechkin's not the all-around player that Gretzky was, in the sense that he'll never finish with the assist total. It won't even come close. Let's put it this way, the fact that he's even, he's at 1,300 points and we marvel at stuff like that, that's rare in today's game even. But he's really approaching a number that you sat there another one I think will never be broken is the 50 and 50. How often will we see 50 and 50 anymore? Probably not, because no one scores like that anymore. It's just not the way the game is. So to think that there's somebody out there that actually could, and let's put it this way, what you really have to bring into play when you talk about Ovechkin and the possibility of breaking Gretzky's goal record is a first, really. And it's not that he would get to the top of the list. I'm saying the number's 895. If he breaks it, he's going to get to 900, probably. And that would be a first. And it's like, that's the mark that no one's ever hit, That's the mark that no one has hit, and who knows if there's anybody out there. I mean, we can look at McDavid, we can look at Matthews and say, that's the next generation of great goal scorers, but are they going to get there? And it's hard to say.
Longevity is like, Matthews might be amazing right now, but you got to do this for how long Ovechkin did. My concern would be age 40, because you mentioned 5 years, which I'm with you, and I think he can do it. Like all athletes, I don't think it's ironic that with all the training and medical and everything that you do off the ice, what we have in today's game is now relating to Tom Brady at 43 years old. All these quarterbacks play until 40 plus. And I know that the game is different where you can't hit the quarterback the same way, which I think also plays a role in how long these players play for. But I just think with technology, where we are with training and everything, there's a reason why we're seeing athletes play older in their career. And the problem I have isn't really Ovechkin playing at 40. It's, can we rely on 35 goals at Ovechkin at 40 years old to put him over the hump? Because that's when it's, okay, he's close. He's going to need a 43-goal season at age 39, 40. If there's anyone who can do it,
right,
sure, it's Ovechkin, but that's a lot to ask for someone who will be 40. Hopefully there's a lot of power plays for that Washington Capitals team at that age where he can camp out.
Well, sure, but the other thing about it too is that I even set the bar lower for him and said, well, look, if you set the bar low and say he needs 30 in the next, finish this year with 30, go the next 3 seasons with 30 each, and you're at another 120 added to your total. Now you're at 840. You need 55 goals to get there, right? And I'm not sitting here saying, like, at that point in time, yes, if you're talking he's got 1 season left and he needs a 55-goal season, now it's tough. But what if he gets the 55 the first year? That next season they come back, it's a full 82. He scores 55 like he never missed a beat. And now he's back on that scoring rate. And now he's still there. And even if he scored 50, even if he scores 45, if he continues to average the 50, 45, 40 range even, like take your total and say instead it takes less than 2 years for him to add 100 more goals because he gets 20 more this year and gets to 30, 35 and gets 40 in each of the next 2 years. And now he's at 100 again. Right. And he's well within 100 of that record. And he's only burned out 2 more full years. So he's 37 or 38 when he needs 60 more goals. If he plays to 40, he's got it.
Yeah. No,
I do think he's got a teammate that motivates him to keep going, because Zdeno Chara is playing well beyond that age, and Ovechkin's sitting there at 35 going, why stop now? And I don't think that's like, I know you asked already. That's why I don't think he's thinking KHL, because he's having some of the most successful years he's ever had in the last collective group of 3 or 4 years for him. You look at, from the team success, he finally won a cup. At this point in time, I think the only thing, and this is why it would probably be such a big deal, and it's why it's a big deal for the NHL players around the Olympics. I think that's the only thing left that he wants is a gold medal and to try to set this record possibly. That's about it. And I don't even know that he thinks about it like, I just want to set the record. I think he actually just wants to try to win a second Stanley Cup. And in the process, he knows he's got to continue to produce at that high level. So he's chipping away at that record while trying to go out and be on a contending team. And they are still a contending team. And that's what keeps him motivated. I think you'd see him start to question that if they weren't a contender, but they're not. They are a contender. It's a great point. They're in the picture. So why stop now? You've got all the good pieces around you. You've got a sound team. You've got everything kind of working for you. Why not expect that you can't go out and achieve something nobody thought was possible?
Well, how disappointing would it be? And maybe it wouldn't be disappointing at all, but I remember hearing something about Patrick Marleau when was his career over? Was it not over? And then I'm like, there was something about his games played. And it seems like he's holding on to beat records with games played. He's got 1,752 games played. And I was looking this up while you were talking there about it. So I'm like, wait, there's something to be said about. I remember Patrick Marleau. What was it? And he's 2 off. Like, he's 3rd all time in games played. And it seems like he's really reaching for Gordie Howe, who's at 1767. So he's 15 games off of number 1 all time. But it's like he's reaching for that. And obviously, he's not the player he once was. In 30 games, he's got 1 goal and all, and he's 41 years old. But how disappointing would it be, or would it not be disappointing at all, if we get to the point where Ovechkin scoring 12 goals at 43 years old, and he's like, okay, now he's 44 and he's scoring 10 goals, and now he's 45 and he's scoring 10 goals, and he's like, all right, it's not the same Ovechkin, and he's trying everything he can to get it, but it loses power because it's not, hey, 30, 40, 50, you know what I mean? Like, he's going for it, but, or is that one of those moments where you just appreciate his prime and what he did, and it's, hey, you appreciate him attacking it. I don't know. I don't know how I would feel if that was the case, because I don't like the Marleau things. It's like, I know what you're doing, but it's not like you're that player anymore.
Well, how recently did he move into 3rd place? It was earlier this season, right? Like, he's played 20-something games. So go to the guy who's in 4th place in games all time and ask yourself the same question.
I have to go back and pull up the list because I accidentally.
No, I'll tell you who it is. I'll tell you. You don't have to look. It's Jaromir Jagr.
Yeah, but Jagr was at the back end of Jagr. He was significantly more than Patrick Marleau.
No, I hear what you're saying, but what I'm trying to say is that Jagr eventually continued. Like, Jagr is still playing today, and it's not like he's just like that far out of the NHL either. He played.
That reminds me.
22 games with Calgary as a 45-year-old.
We need to ask. I was going to say, we got to ask Johnny about some funny Jagr stories.
That would be great. Yeah, that'll be great because that guy's a character.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but it's almost like he got to a point because in those 22 games he had 1 goal, and this is one of the great, and again, one of the great scorers of all time, who's played at that high level throughout his career. He had 1 goal and 7 points in 22 games. If you don't feel like you're cutting it, but you feel like you still want to play or could play, he darts off to another league, right? He goes home to Czech Republic. He's going to go play somewhere else, right? That, to me, like, if we ever got to a world where Alex Ovechkin is playing and at 42 years old wants to still play, but he's only producing 9 or 10 goals a season, and it's not the rate we're used to, then I think the KHL's in play. And it's like, go play somewhere where you're in your home country, even if you're doing it just for a year or two to get, almost like to do a farewell tour for your like your hometown, your home country, all that stuff, right? Like, that's what that could turn into. And sure, at that point in time, we'll see what he'd be able to do. I'm sure he would have success because of obviously different rank dimensions, all that type of stuff. But yeah, I think that if it ever got to that point, then Ovechkin would step back and go, I'm not in it to keep playing. The only way he would stay at that rate is, again, if the team is that good in front of him and he's now the 3rd line guy, which is pushing it way back. I mean, I don't ever see him becoming a 3rd line guy in his career, but you know what I mean? Like, you can play the depth role at that point and say there's a good enough team in front that at the end of the year, there's still the possibility that you're holding the Stanley Cup. And that would keep you going. Otherwise, like, I think Jágr kind of realized the teams he was on at the time weren't really going to that level. And that's why he gave it up at that time. Like, and it's not like he hadn't won. Like, that's the other thing too. Everybody who hasn't won a Stanley Cup is going to keep pushing. And that's one thing Marleau does not have. So I do think that's also why he's in it. Now,
that's fair.
Now, in fairness, I don't know that I would have gone to San Jose to think that was where it was coming this particular year.
Carlson made the same mistake. His words recently was like, hey, I did not come here to rebuild.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Like, otherwise, that's what most of these guys are still in the game for. Like I think that the opposite effect, to put it on the other side, you don't have to go that much further down the games played list to find another guy who continues to play year after year, and we keep wondering if it's his last or whatever. Joe Thornton's 6th all time.
But
him. Joe Thornton decided to, instead of continuing to play that out in San Jose and go through those rebuilding years, now he's with Toronto.
That's
now he's with the team.
That's first line Joe Thornton to you.
Yeah, but that means he still plays at a high rate, right? That if you put him with these kids, he's kind of, it's like a shot, it's a boost for him, right?
It's so funny. I'm just trying to picture, like, if I'm Mitch Marner and I'm Auston Matthews and I'm coming down the wall and it's like Joe Thornton is just driving the net, or even like it's almost funny if Joe Thornton scores like a greasy rebound after Mitch Marner and Matthews come into the zone and they dangle and they make these unreal plays. And here's Joe Thornton just cleaning up the garbage, and then you see them celebrate in the corner, like this grizzled vet with a beard that's gray hanging down to his chest. It's just funny, man. I love it. I would love to see the reaction of Jumbo Joe lifting that Stanley Cup, man. Oh!
Now, here's the thing. He's at 6th in games played. He's not going to be able to get to 5 this year. Like, he's got almost 75, 80 games to go until he gets to 5th all time on the games played list. If they were to win this year, if Toronto were to win the whole thing, which I know you've been, not so secretly rooting for. Right. And in addition, is certainly a distinct possibility. I mean, not to assume anything in the playoffs just yet, but I think it's pretty safe to say they'll probably be there. They'll be in that tournament, so to speak. Then I do think that if they did win, he'd hang it up.
I agree.
Like I think that if that's what he's in it for. I don't think he's in it looking at, oh, if I get to this many, or Marleau, and he played with Marleau obviously for a little while, so it's not like he's looking at Marleau and going, well, he's going to set the new bar and I'm going to try to beat that. I don't think that's what it is at all. Like, I think he's 1 year away. And I think that this year, like, I think if they don't win the cup, he'll come back next year too, because he'll see that they have a team capable of it. Like, right now, they're one of the best teams in the league, right? I mean, and I level it off, like they're tied at the top, I believe, now, because Edmonton's really gotten on a roll.
Yeah.
So Edmonton's now tied. So Edmonton's tied for the division lead. Now, there's a few other teams that have more points. Like, at one point in time, they were the top. They're all of a sudden now back in, like, a tie for 7th place in points, which isn't saying a lot because it's only a separation of 4 points from the top. But there's enough teams that have pulled ahead of them now that it's like, you're going to be in for a fight. I mean, you might be the best team still. I mean, even against Edmonton, you might still be the best team in that North Division when the playoffs roll around. But then you're going to have to play somebody else. And I don't know who it's going to be. And it could be any of the top 6. We've already kind of discussed that a little bit when it came to the structure, right? So it could be anybody for that, so-called conference final, and then anybody for that Stanley Cup final. Like, right now, imagine, and it's funny, because what if we actually had, because it's certainly a distinct possibility. What if it turned out to be Ovechkin against Matthews and Thornton and all that stuff, right? And it was a question of whether or not Ovechkin got his second one, or if Thornton finally gets his.
Wow.
If Toronto makes the Stanley Cup final, it's almost like, as much as it's about Matthews and their overall building process of this team that has continued to have so much regular season success and yet fallen short, of once it gets to the playoffs multiple times, can't even get out, you know how it goes, can't even get out of the first round, right? What if that was your final? Like, if you had that as the final, then obviously the building part of it is one big step, but Joe Thornton gets tons of attention because they always look for that guy. Who's the guy who is not the leader of the group, like in terms of the captain, but is the first guy you want to hand that trophy off to because he's waited so long for it.
I just wrote that question down. It's like you read my mind. I was going to say, are you going to have a Ray Bourque moment? Would it be to that effect, or am I going to an extreme of, dude, that Colorado Avalanche situation was one of a kind? I don't know if it matches that level, but it does somewhat have that feel. I mean, we are talking about Joe Thornton here, but I don't know. Would it be that's historic. That is a historic Stanley Cup moment. Would this, I'm not going to say top that, but would this be in that same conversation if something went down in that way? You could make it that, I feel. I mean, it has to happen naturally, but would this be on that level?
See, there's one key difference to me in that, and that's that Thornton's played for two different teams in his career. And I can't see Boston fans sitting there going, I feel really good for Joe Thornton to win with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I can see San Jose having that moment, because I think San Jose, like anybody who's a fan of San Jose is looking, going, yeah, it wasn't going to happen here. If there's anybody who deserves it, it's him. He's poured himself into these. I mean, I believe Joe Thornton was the guy who, when they made that playoff run a few years back, didn't he play on essentially he played on one leg down the stretch? He had so many injuries out of that Stanley Cup final year, right? Or even was the year after, it might have been when they lost to it wasn't the year they lost to Vegas in the playoffs, but it was because that was a couple years later. But
yeah,
every time they made the playoffs and they didn't make it to the final, it was like he was one of the guys who was still willing to play, even though he tore an MCL in his leg or something like something. There was always something like that. So I do think that's the fan base that will go, this is such a feel-good moment for him, because they already know where their season's going, right? You can go, they're not that far off from the bottom of the list that you go start rooting for somebody like that who has a shot, who was one of your own. You know what I mean?
Now you have me thinking, if Claude Giroux was to win a Stanley Cup with, I don't know, I'm not going to say Penguins, because I don't think anyone would be happy for, I don't know. Is that crazy? If Claude Giroux left the Flyers and magically went to the Penguins, and this is a crazy hypothetical, but would the fan base be happy for, because you mentioned Boston fans won't be happy, but the difference is the length of time since Joe Thornton played for the Bruins compared to now. They don't have that same emotional tie, although I'm sure they do care and root for him to, succeed to some degree. Would people be? The problem is Claude Giroux is such a hated figure in this town for some odd reason. So should we use someone else as an example? If Kimmo Timonen won not with Chicago, but won with the New Jersey Devils, would Flyers fans be happy for Kimmo Timonen to finally lift the cup? I'm trying to put it in perspective here with another athlete.
I mean, in a year where they missed the playoffs, yes, because I don't think it works because Boston's going to make the playoffs probably. I mean, there's nothing for sure and certain about that yet either, but nonetheless, I would imagine they do. And if they do, then you're not thinking like that. You're still thinking about the disappointment of not being the team that wins. The years that we're talking about, it was when expectations were so low for the team that they were previously on that you started to we all were rooting for Kimmo Timonen to win the Stanley Cup with Chicago that year. Why? Because you knew he had a shot and you knew that was going to be the best chance he had to get it. So why not, And I think that's the thing. When you have a team that doesn't have that shot and somebody goes on and has the chance to win, then you do start to get behind him because,
At that point, too, the Flyers were, lost to them in the Stanley Cups before. So, and that was when Chicago was in that run of insane success. So, I mean, there was kind of some hatred towards Chicago at that point because of them just beating you in Game 6 in overtime just years prior.
Well, let's put it this way. I'll give you a perfect example because it just came into my mind. We're talking about Joe Thornton with the Toronto Maple Leafs winning a Stanley Cup and San Jose fans being happy for him because after all those years there, he'd finally get what he's always wanted, right? Do you think for a second that we won't be able to go on social media if Toronto wins the Stanley Cup and not see 20,000 Flyers fans going, good for Wayne Simmons, who's poured his heart and soul into it and gone all this time and finally got the reward. He went to a place where they actually pulled it off. And he doesn't have to be the guy. Same thing with Joe Thornton. He doesn't have to be the guy, but he ended up being a part.
The rivalry between Boston and Toronto is insanely
right. That's why I said it.
Yeah, Flyers, Toronto. So
because see, that's the difference though too. It's less about the player and more about the rivalry between the teams. Because it's one thing if Joe Thornton had played anywhere. Like Ray Bourque was a different animal because it was a team in the other conference. There was no rivalry there. It's just they sent him to a team that everybody knew had a shot, and he won, right? He finally won. He finally got what he wanted, and everybody was thrilled for it. And it's not like after all that time, like he played a year and a half with Colorado to get that and then retired. And then from then on, it's back to being a Boston Bruin because that's where the length of his career really was. That's the same thing with a lot of these other guys where it's like you can sit there at the end of the day and go, what team are you? Even if Joe Thornton wins a Stanley Cup with Toronto, you're going to associate him with San Jose because that's where the longest point of his career was. And that's where the most success of his career was, even though the most team-oriented success that you can have came in Toronto. If it were to happen, the individual success, what built him into the player that he is, goes to the San Jose years, because even in Boston, he wasn't that player to that point. There was a reason why he got moved when he did, that it happened, right? That he ended up on another team. So that's, I think, also a thing that separates it, is that there's a difference between and waiting your turn to get to that spot and build. And it's where you establish your career. I think, like, at the end of the day, I think that Joe Thornton goes back to San Jose and starts to work in the community there and be a presence around that team again in his retired days than he does stick around Toronto or go back to Boston. You know what I mean? Like, that's the city that's going to associate with him the most or resonate with him the most. And that's what you got to think about.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I love the fact, by the way, but we're going to throw it over to Johnny Gaudreau here in just a second. But this is what I love about me and you talking hockey. There was not for 1 second since we started this show where Joe Thornton was ever like, you know what we should talk about today? Joe Thornton. Yet we can just rock and roll, trade. Like, what the hell just happened? We just went on a damn roll about Jumbo Joe. And that's what I love about us, man. We just talk hockey and it just goes in its own direction. It's a beautiful thing. But with that being said, as I alluded to, let's throw it on over to Johnny Gaudreau. Johnny Gaudreau is now joining us. Johnny, what's going on?
How's it going?
We are living the dream, as they say. And with that being said, you guys as a squad right now seem to have a little bit of energy and a little bit of buzz going right now. So now that you had more time with Daryl Sutter, what stands out to you the most about his coaching style and how he has you guys playing with this energy?
Yeah, I mean, he, like I said last week, I mean, it's kind of the same concept, coming in. He expects a lot out of us. You're not playing well, you're not going to be on the ice, and it's that simple. And it's great. Our team's playing hard. Obviously, we're fighting to try to get into the playoff position here. So, and then with this short season, we got to get going. So, it's important every game.
Well, I got a two-parter for you, kind of. So, first off, how you feeling after the hit on Friday?
Yeah, I'm all right. Not the first time, not the last time I'll be hit. So,
yeah.
But it was a big one, obviously. But it's part of the game. Keep my head up, my dad would say.
Well, going off of that, not long after the hit takes place, Matthew Tkachuk goes out there and fights Justin Hall. And I've always felt Matthew Tkachuk is that type of player, a guy who can be a heart and soul guy on a team and has a lot of talent, but the physical edge as well. How much do those moments bring a team closer together?
Yeah, I mean, that's really important. It's part of the game. And, he's a great teammate, great player. So, I've loved playing with him since he's joined our team 3-4 years ago. So, he's a player that, takes a lot of pride in his game. And, if someone's going to, hit someone or take advantage of another guy, he's a guy. Him, Luch, Ronaldo, those are guys that, kind of don't stand for it. So, it's great to see that. And obviously, was happy, kind of helped me out there.
Now, how does that affect the game the rest of the way? When you take a hit like that, are you conscious of it? Or, I mean, because, look, you've been around where you know that you have to understand the situation. But once you get a good rock like that, it's like, all right, the bell's rung and we need to be more prepared. Does that change the way that you play for at least the rest of that night? Or is it, all right, as soon as it happens, you're back to where you always are mentally?
I mean, it's all part of the game. I mean, obviously, you try to get by it as quick as you can and forget about it. But when you get hit that hard, sometimes it kind of sits with you a little bit. But it was. I I found a way to get by it really quick, and obviously it was a close game, and there's a 1-goal game there, so no time to think about the hit. Just move on and try not to get hit again, I guess.
How much was this week in general, the 2 games against Edmonton, the 2 against Toronto, given the intensity that you guys are playing with under Darryl to begin with, and then playing teams that are right at the top of the standings like that? How much of that is a preparation for the style of playoff hockey?
Yeah, it's huge for us. I mean, pretty much every game right now for us is a playoff game. I mean, we can't go into games, hopefully, not lose a game because, where we are at in the standings, it's just, we can't afford losses. So, it's pretty much, win for us and move on to the next game because, we are so close in the standings, and there's a team behind us really close and a team in front of us really close for that fourth spot there. So, it's a grind every day, but, it's part of the game. That's why I love playing the game.
All right, don't hate me for this one. In your last 6, you guys are 4-2, but you only have 1 point, which is 1 goal. How do you mentally handle the team? 4-2 in a 6-game span is definitely grabbing some points, but personally, you would probably like to have more points on the board. How do you handle that mentally with, look, our team is succeeding, but I'm used to, producing a little bit more than I am?
A rocket of a goal, by the way, Hunter.
I'm agreeing with him. I'm agreeing with him. It was good.
It was okay. It was all right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've gotten this question asked, a ton of times throughout my career, and the most important thing is your team winning games. And for me personally, obviously, would like to, create some more chemistry and get on the board, but your team's winning games. That's really important. And, that's the most important thing. And you can't worry about points and stuff like that. It's being an offensive guy. Sometimes it hurts a little, but your team's winning games. That's the most important thing.
Speaking of points, you played 2 really top players in the game at this point. You played Connor McDavid and Auston Matthews. And I'm going to focus on the Toronto side because one of the things that certainly stood out to me on the score sheet was that Auston Matthews had no points in the 2 games. And Darryl praised Chris Tanev specifically about what he did to contain him, and even scored a goal in the win on Friday. So he's in his first season with the Flames. How much does he stabilize the defensive zone and provide a veteran presence?
Yeah, he's been awesome for us. Coming into a new team is, not always the easiest thing, getting to know the new guys and stuff. But since day one, him, Markstrom, those 2 guys have been, a huge part of our team and huge success and why we've won a lot of our games. So, and like I say, he's not the most offensive defenseman, but, we love to see him score goals, and, he gets excited for him. And, his defensive game's just, off the charts.
This might sound random, but earlier in the show, we brought up Joe Thorton, Marlowe, and the games played discussion came up. So Jágr popped into our minds, and we were kind of discussing Jágr or whatever. But you had a time to play with him. If there's not a Jágr story that you can tell, what is it like just being around Jágr at the rink? And I know it's random, but it popped up. So just knowing that you had an experience with him in the locker room, what is it like if you can't think of a story that you could possibly share?
You got 45 minutes. I can explain it to you. No, yeah. What a cool experience, obviously, playing with him. I got to assist on one of his goals. Pretty cool experience for me. Kind of learned from him, but the stories are endless. He's very, a superstitious guy, I think. He's got his fake wig in a stall. It's a long fake wig mullet thing in the stall, and he'll shoot medicine balls before games and stuff. And I can go on and on, but it's cool. It was a cool experience. I mean, he was one of the best players ever played a game, and to be able to play a season with him, I think it was half a season. We parted ways with him, but I mean, it's just a cool experience, and chatted with him a lot. So a lot of things I can take away from my game and kind of learn from him, I think.
I'm going to shift to the games coming up this week. You have 2 wins and 3 losses against the Ottawa Senators this season, but this will be the first time you face them with Darryl behind the bench. How important is this week to take the things you've applied to your game from Darryl's system and his style and take care of business against a team at the bottom of the division like that?
Yeah, these are 2 huge games for us. Like you said, you got to try to take advantage of, teams when they're not playing well, and I'm not sure how they've been doing recently, but when it's frustrating sometimes coming to the rink and you're at the bottom of the standings and you're not winning games, and I've been there before, so it's sometimes a little tough coming to the rink, and that's when you got to try to kind of jump on them early and try to just kind of run away with the game pretty much. But like I said, these are two real important games for us, and if we find a way to snag 4 points on this 6 out of 8 points on this road trip, that'd be huge for us. We're going back home, and hopefully they can let fans in our building soon and get a little fans in there and stuff. That'd be fun too.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be an energizer for sure. All right, so it's hard to sweep teams, obviously. So when you look at what happened with Edmonton and Toronto, are you the glass half full kind of guy with, look, we showed that we can compete with Edmonton and Toronto, who are at the top of the North Division, or is it more of, hey, there's a sense of urgency because we got to get points where it's, we can't be splitting with teams, we got to grab those points? Or is it a combination of both to some degree?
Probably to some degree both, but I mean, at the end of the day, we're not in the playoffs, and you can't, even though it is nice to split, normally with a team that's in the top of your division, that's something that on a regular road trip where you're in the playoffs already, you're okay with. But since for us, I mean, right now, not good enough. And, we didn't score any goals last game against Toronto, and I thought we played a good game, a hard game, but didn't capitalize on a few chances, and but those are games that we need to win personally right now as a team.
All right, we'll leave you with this. We actually got a little bit of fan mail, and it's pretty out there. It is what it is. Do you tape your stick?
No chance.
What's that? Do you tape?
I said no chance.
Yeah. Do you take your stick in the same spot every single pregame?
No, sometimes I don't even tape my stick.
What?
To be honest, for warm-ups.
What?
For warm-ups?
Dude, come on.
It's just warm-ups.
You're joking.
Sometimes I use the stick that I used last game. But no, I'm not superstitious or anything like that. For me personally, tape the stick and just move on and get ready for the game.
Now, is that standard though? Because I feel like that is honestly out there. I don't think I've ever met someone who didn't tape their stick before warm-ups.
Yeah, I tape them before the game, a new fresh tape job, and most periods I tape them, unless I didn't really touch the puck too much during the period before. But for me personally, no. And sometimes just get out there and just go with the flow. But a lot of guys on my team, are superstitious like that and tape sticks and
superstitious. Taping your stick has now become superstitious. That's unbelievable.
I don't know.
You're unbelievable. I don't know. This guy just throws on his gear and goes out there and gives you 3 goals and 3 assists like a jag-off. All right, with that being said, we're gonna end this. We're gonna end this here. Thanks, John, so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Wow, Durso. Wow. Unbelievable. Always fun talking to Johnny. The Flames, real quickly with the Flames, they have some good wins, and then they lose, they get shut out, but they have a really solid win before that. They had a good win against Edmonton. They had a sloppy loss against Edmonton. Is it kind of just what we see in this team to this point? I feel every time we kind of touch on the Flames, it's up and down, inconsistent. They show flashes, and then they show a little bit of disappointment. But here is the thing. I do think the coaching change definitely sparked something in their intensity with that hit on Johnny and Kachuk, and I feel that there's some a sense of urgency with the head coaching change for sure, and hopefully that can spiral into a little bit more of consistent play.
I think that the real, and it's weird to call this a test per se, but I think them playing Ottawa is going to be huge this week because that's a team that's kind of had your number for a lot of the year. But the coaching changes clearly changed them in some way. I thought that the 2 wins they had were playoff style wins, and the 2 losses they had are kind of similar to an extent. I mean, look, it's hard, it's hard to look at that Edmonton loss and not just go back to the Connor McDavid is doing stuff that's ridiculous right now. Right. And Toronto's such a loaded team that it's not like that wasn't a competitive game. It's just that's how hard they play. And that's why they're at the top of the standings for a reason. They're the 2 teams right at the top right now. And see, now you're getting the other end of the spectrum, though. So if you continue to play your game the way that you have, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to beat Ottawa and try to carry that over into playing Winnipeg over the weekend and things like that. Like they've got an interesting week ahead of them, and I think that they continue to be they're trending in the right direction. I say in the sense that like, yeah, they're still below that playoff cut line. Yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done, but they've shown way more in the last few games. And if they, any head to heads they've got left with the likes of Winnipeg, Montreal, Vancouver, that's your season.
Yep.
If you can, honestly, I think when you look at the two teams they played this week, you can look at Edmonton and Toronto and go, getting 2 wins out of that 4, it's not bad. It keeps pace. You can't afford to lose both, I think. But
yeah,
but you kept pace. You're there, and now you got to really take it to when you play Ottawa, who's behind you, and when you play those 3 teams directly in front of you, not separated by all that much. You got to go after it. I think this, I do believe this team is better than Vancouver is. I do believe this team has a shot to catch one of the other 2. It's just a matter of building off of this. But they look totally different under Daryl Sutter than what I saw earlier in the season, and that's the good thing. They're
I agree.
Definitely playing with much more urgency. They're playing a harder game. They're definitely willing to be physical. We saw that on Friday. They're willing to get back up after getting knocked down and throw it around themselves,
I guess shame on me for coming out. You're right. The way you put it in perspective, you're going up against arguably the 2 best in the division. If you could take 2 of 4, fine. All right,
right.
Let's go beat Ottawa. Let's go beat Vancouver. Let's go beat those teams that can really help you push yourself up into the standings. And
it has to be, because now for you, it's one thing to say you just crossed the halfway threshold at this point. You're 32 games played in your season. You're coming up on being down to 20 to go, and whenever you play any of those teams, it's kind of got to have them games at this point. And it's, they're going to get Winnipeg 3 times in a row coming up. I mean, we'll talk to Johnny again before they play that 3rd game of that little series there.
It's another tough team.
It is tough. And that's the thing that's going to have to come into play there. It's going to be tough, and they're going to have to find a way to do it. But that's your opportunity. I mean, you're going to go into that series potentially. I don't want to jump the gun because that's later in the week, but there's a possibility you're going to go into it exactly where you are right now, 5 points back in the standings. And what does 3 wins do for you? Quite possibly,
Yeah, I'm looking
it could
forward
be,
to it.
It could be less, but I'm looking forward to it too, because there were times, and it's unfortunate because they have a lot of talent, but there were times where it looked like they were just not playing up to the full potential earlier in the year. There's not a game I've watched this week from them and in the previous week with Daryl Sutter behind the bench that I'm like, it's not like this team doesn't want it. They want it. It's just, you're playing, I think the Edmonton game was a case of any mistake made, it's to McDavid and he's finding a way to help score, or anybody else for that matter. And the Toronto game was just a hard-fought game against a really good team. And you beat them once, which is good. You knew that they were determined the next night, and that's what you got. So they're going the right direction. Very clearly they are. And it's been fun to watch because it feels like they're in just about every game at this point. Even that Edmonton game, as lopsided as it was at the end, that was a 4-goal third period. So second period toward the end, yeah, they were in it. They had a shot. So that's the good part.
I agree with you. When they play, there's definitely a different atmosphere to it, and you don't think they're going to get walked all over. The energy is going to be there, and the coaching change definitely did spark this club a little bit. So we'll see where this goes. So with that being said, thank you guys all so much for listening to this episode of Open Ice Hits, and we will see you later on in the week.